In a public restroom, two walls were freshly painted. They left one blank and they wrote on the other, "Do not write on this wall." Where do you think most people wrote? السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. If you answered most people scribbled on the wall where it says "do not write on this wall," then you have answered correctly. This is something psychologists call reactance theory. And it's when you tell someone not to do something and they go do it just because you said don't do it. What happens is when you tell them "do not write on this wall" or any other such thing, it basically challenges a freedom that they believe they have. And so to assert and to prove that they have that freedom, they go do exactly the opposite of what you tell them not to do. And that's why it's not good advice to use this technique with your children. Don't do this, don't do that. The first thing they want to do is exactly what you told them not to do. Reactance theory. So what are some ways to avoid reactance when it comes to dealing with youth and teenagers and your own children? One technique is to use bargaining. And I know what you think as a parent, if you are a parent. Bargaining? I'm the boss. I'm the dad. I don't have to bargain. I tell them what to do. And if they don't like it, all that other stuff. One thing you learn about da'wah is if you use diplomacy and if you use finesse, you get what you want more than if you use force and if you use fear. It's not a good tactic and it doesn't work. You know the old saying, when the cat's away, the mice will play. So if your children obey you just out of fear, when you're not there to be afraid of anymore, they're going to do exactly the opposite. So bargaining, or if you want to call it the illusion of choice. Let's take an example. Your son is creating a huge ruckus. He's refusing to go to bed until or unless you give him a full jar of cookies to have as many cookies as he wants. So you give him the illusion of choice. You're going to say, look, you have two choices, pick one. You can have one cookie and go to bed, or go to bed with no cookies whatsoever. What do you think he'll choose? He'll probably choose the one cookie and go to bed. He's not going to choose, you only gave him these two choices, so he can't pick anything else. So you still win, because instead of eating a full jar of cookies, or like 5, 6, 7 of them, he just ate one. You still win. Most people think, no, I'm the boss and they have to do what I say. That doesn't work. And all of us want our children to obey us, not out of fear, but we want them to really be honest with us in that sense. So this is one technique, you bargain with them. Some parents just yell at their children all the time, or some teachers yell at the students. Let's say you're teaching a class full of 9-year-olds, and all the time you're just yelling and threatening. That's actually a very poor technique, and it doesn't work, because when you're yelling all the time, they get used to that. That's all they hear from you, and it doesn't sound urgent to them. You don't sound angry to them. That's just how you sound all the time. And I've seen teachers who use yelling as a technique. So they'll tell the students, get up, go, come in, sit down quickly, sit. And they just take their time. The students are going slowly because they don't hear him yelling. That's how he speaks all the time, this teacher. He's yelling the entire time. Or a mother who says everything angrily to her children. If she wants to tell them, brush your teeth, she yells. If dinner is ready, she yells at them, the dinner is ready, go to your seat. Why? There's no need for that. But now when she really does get upset and she's irate and she starts yelling, they behave exactly the same way, because that's how mom sounds all the time. She's always yelling. So what are some other techniques? When disciplining your child, you can discipline and still show love at the same time. And it's very, very important, because the love shows acceptance. And we need acceptance from family members, and we also need it from siblings. If you ever wonder, you might sometimes find someone who's very, very kind and very forgiving, but with their own brother or their own sister, their siblings, they're very unforgiving. And psychologists say, why is it that when siblings fight, they get very angry with each other? It gets quite more intense than let's say in the masjid, you're more forgiving with strangers, but not as forgiving with siblings. And the explanation is that we actually very much so need to feel accepted by our siblings, because their opinion of us matters more than a complete stranger I'll never see again. So to feel accepted by them is very important. And that's why if we feel that we're not accepted, or they criticize us, we get upset to another level. Same thing with the parents and the children. So while you reprimand your child, or while you discipline your child, at the same time still show them that you love them. And if you like use insults, and you put them down with strong language, they'll believe that that's who they are. And that's why they tell you, never tell a child that you're a bad boy or you're a naughty boy. You tell them that was a bad thing that you did, or that was a naughty thing that you did. But you don't put it in their mind that they're bad and they're naughty and they're no good. There was one time this young man, and he had a very bad relationship with his parents, and he was getting flunking and breaking the law, all kinds of problems. But one of the biggest problems is that his father was causing that. How so? All the time his father kept telling him that he's useless, he'll amount to nothing, and he always kept telling him, look at so-and-so's son, getting good grades, his parents are so proud of him, why can't you be like him? So he fell into that role. He fell into the role of accepting the fact that he's worthless, he's no good. So there was no motivation and no need for him to progress beyond that, or to make any changes whatsoever. So in that case, one of the things we had to do was first counsel between the father and the son, and talk to the father about how to treat the son. And sometimes, even though the problem may seem huge and the child may be really far from the straight path, it can be corrected so quickly if you know exactly what to do. And that's why within a short period of time, alhamdulillah, the young man was praying and he was getting excellent grades, and he stopped doing all the illegal things. Walillahi alhamd. Here's a story that happened one time. We were in a Quran class teaching a bunch of kids. All of them have their mushaf up on the desk, except for one girl. I noticed that her mushaf was down here. So I go over to check what she's doing, and she has a Harry Potter book open on top of the mushaf, and she's reading Harry Potter. Which means she has no interest in the Quran and coming and attending Islamic class and all these things. So how do we fix, and how do you motivate a child like that, and how do you get them to read the Quran? A number of things that are important here. Number one, never punish a child by telling them to go read the Quran. Why? Because then they associate the Quran with punishment. They associate it with punishment. Go to your room and read the Quran. That's what it becomes now, a punishment. Just like certain countries, we're not going to mention the names, but in certain countries, they only play the Quran out loud when there's a funeral. Someone dies, they play the Quran. So there was a brother from that country in a car with another brother. That brother played the Quran in the car stereo. And the brother said, could you please turn it off? It reminds me of funerals. It depresses me. Yes, because he associated the Quran with funerals. That's the only time he listens to the Quran. So you make sure, never ever is the Quran a source of punishment for your child. Now, some of the things they tell you, for example, like you could have Quran memorization sandwiched in between two fun activities. For example, like let's say we have tea time around Maghrib, we have some tea and some cookies and some cake or something like that. So we can sandwich the Quran between the playground and the tea time, for example. So they associate it with these two fun activities instead of associating it with a punishment. It's always best to have your children want to do something of their own accord, and they're not doing it just because you want them to do it or because you force them to go to a class. We always say that if you force me upon your point of view, then be sure that I am still upon mine. So convince me, don't just make me do it because you want me to do it. Don't do that to your child. Make them want to be, get them to want to learn and memorize the Quran on their own. It's not like you're forcing them and they have to sneak a book on top of the Quran to read and things like that. So, and by the way, children are really smart and youth are really smart. They can understand these things very, very well. Usually when we're teaching at an Islamic school for the first time, almost like the first or second class, we discuss the purposes of the Sharia. So they understand that the religion is not a list of do's and don'ts. If any of you have experience dealing with youth, you've probably noticed that youth, they mostly ask you halal and haram questions. And the weirdest things in the world, they ask you if it's halal. Like one guy came to me and said, is it halal to take off your hat? Is public school halal? All kinds of weird questions. But they're always halal haram questions. Rarely does a young man come to you and say, where should I put my hands after coming up from ruku'? What is the proper way to do this according to fiqh? Never. It's always halal haram. Why? Because that's how we teach them the religion, is that it's a list of things you can do and a list of things that you can't do. And of course, that's not what the religion is about. But when you teach them that way, that's all they think it's about. So You have to explain to them, give them the wisdoms behind why they want to do something. Why do you want to learn the Quran? What's the benefit of learning the Quran versus Quran class, prayer time, and just always yelling like that. So what have we been discussing in this episode? These are techniques to change the behavior or the attitude of youth, your children, students, people that you deal with. And you can also apply some of the same techniques that we mentioned for the adults, but youth specifically need a little bit more attention. And like we mentioned, they basically live up to your expectation. So if you expect a lot from them, they will impress you with some very intelligent things and very capable things. If you contemplate at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Usama ibn Zayd, when he was about 17 or almost 18, the Prophet ﷺ put him in charge of an army, and in this army were supposed to be Abu Bakr and Umar. They didn't go because of other reasons, including the death, well, mostly the death of the Prophet ﷺ later on. But otherwise, imagine this 17-year-old young man would have been leading an army with such great men and much older people in it, and under him as well. And that's because they treated him like he was capable, so he lived up to the expectation. Today, if you find most 17-year-olds, you're barely able to trust a lot of them with things. Why? Because we tell them you're children until you reach the magical age of 18. Realistically, it's only a mental barrier. There's nothing special about it, 18, that makes them mature or anything like that, but it just keeps them immature. That's all it does. So, again, like with everything we've been talking about, try these techniques. Try it next time your child doesn't want to go to bed unless they do this. Give them 2 choices that narrow it down. Let him pick one. Don't yell all the time. Put whatever you want him to acquire of good behavior or whatever he has to do, put it between 2 fun things. Do not punish them by having them read or write an essay. All these things are very, very important when it comes to dealing with the youth. So inshallah, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal that you're able to apply that. Sallallahu barak ala Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.